we are live. Hello there, how you doing? Say hi in the chat if you are there. Okay. So in today's session, I want to talk about the Interactivity Router, which is a package that comes with the Interactivity API. So this package is already enabled in some parts of the WordPress core blocks. For example, the query loop block. Let me try to. The query loop block has a toggle, and the query loop block by default, it triggers a full reload of the page. But we can set this block to do a client-side navigation, which means that not the full page will be loaded, only the specific portion of the HTML that needs to be rendered. What's the advantage of this? The HTML is going to be loaded, but the amount of HTML that is going to be processed by the browser is going to be only a little portion of it. Let me see if I can configure the query loop block to have client-side navigation. So by default, we come here. Okay, I only have one post. Let me create, there is this plugin called Faker, which I like a lot to create. Like to create a lot of fake posts. For example, I want maybe 20 posts or something like that. I activate this. Here I can select maybe 25. Because by having several posts, we can check how the query loop block in its pagination, it only loads the specific portion of it. Okay, so the posts are generated. If we go to Appearance and Editor, in this template, for example, we have a query loop block here. If we go to the Advanced section, we can see this toggle, which is disabled because we are in 6.8. And this is one of the new things coming in WordPress 6.9 for the Interactivity Router. The thing is that we couldn't disable this because by default is full page, but if we disable this, we can enable client-side navigation with the query loop block. But right now we are in WordPress 6.8. So let's update. I think I'm going to lose the posts that I have created. But anyway, let's load 6.9. Let's go to, yes, I have lost, well, it's very quickly. Okay, I want to install this plugin. I want to activate this plugin, and I want to create 25, for example. Nice. So what I want to do is to show how the query loop leverages the Interactivity Router package. In order to do that, I have created a lot of posts. And if we visit the site, and we inspect the page, and we go to network, and I filter by doc, every time that I go to a new page, I'm going to get a new doc, which means there's a full page reload. We're getting a new document, which means that the whole HTML is fetched, but also the whole HTML is processed in the browser. So a way to avoid to process the whole HTML, because we don't need to process the whole HTML, we only need, in this case, this area. We don't need to process the header again, we don't need to process all this footer, we just need to update this specific portion. One way to do that is to enable client-side navigation, and the Interactivity API allows that. And the query loop block allows us to do that with a toggle that can be disabled. By default, the query loop block uses like full page. So if we go edit side, here we are editing this template. If we go here to query loop, and we go to advanced now, because we are in WordPress 6.9, we should have this. This is related to one of the updates coming in WordPress 6.9 for the Interactivity Router. The specific update that is related to this is this one. The thing is that it was disabled because when there was a navigation to a page that had some block that required to load script modules, that those blocks didn't work because those modules weren't loaded. This has been fixed in WordPress 6.9, and this fix has allowed this feature to be enabled. I mean, now we can disable this, we can save, and when we navigate through pages using the query loop block, we will see how there's no a full page reload anymore. So let's check that. If we inspect the page and we go to network, maybe what I can do is to select less elements per page. This is something that I can set here in custom. Maybe, I don't know, 3 per page. Okay, with these elements per page, and if I inspect and we go to network and we filter by doc, and we select next page, we can see how there's no a new document loaded directly from the browser, but what we are doing is retrieving those pages, the HTML of those pages. We are getting them by using a fetch in the background. We can see, we click another one, we can see we are doing this. So the HTML is here, and what the Interactivity Router and the Interactivity API is doing is getting the HTML, comparing with the current HTML, and just update the difference in that section that is defined as a router region, I think is the right name. Okay, so this is more or less the idea of the Interactivity Router. Another thing that we can do here is, for example, let me go to the post 1. If I edit this post, and for example, I'm going to add here an image. For example, this one. And what I'm going to do is enlarge on click, because this behavior is powered by the Interactivity API. So what I want to prove is this thing, that when inside of router navigation, no, Interactivity Router navigation or client navigation through the different regions, the blocks that are inside those regions can be interactive as well. Okay, if I save, Okay, so we have saved this post where we have added an image, and that image now have lightbox behavior. So now if we go to the query loop, we can see how inside the query loop we can have this behavior working. And this is working as you can see. It has some directives here. data.wp on load and blah blah. And there's also an attached to somewhere. Let me see. Attached to. Here. Data.wp region, router region. So the thing that happened here. Hombre, Alfredo, ¿qué tal? How are you? I'm talking here about the interactivity router. All good? Good to know. Are you familiar with the interactivity router? I've been working with that this week a lot. I've been reviewing the documentation and I feel much more comfortable with it now. Yeah. So yeah, the thing about the interactivity router is that it's actually applied in some parts of WordPress core. I was just explaining that in the query loop, for example, is implemented and it allows us to do navigation as an single page application. You know the concept of this single page application where the navigation is controlled by the client. So we can do something like that now with the interactivity router. I have here a really cool example. Let me see if I can find it. This is a very simple. This is something that I have borrowed from Luis, which is the mastermind behind the Interactivity API. And this is a implementation of the Interactivity Router and the Interactivity API in raw HTML. I mean, we can really, these are NPM components that we can use in different environments because they encapsulate some logic and some APIs that can be used even outside of WordPress. The good thing about these packages is that they have been implemented with the mindset of WordPress blocks and the block paradigm. So they are fully compatible with how blocks work, but they can also be used outside the WordPress installation. And this is interesting if we want just to very quickly test these packages and the API they provide. For example, here we have a little app that uses some directives of the Interactivity API, but also some regions. I'm going to create here a Scali draw. I have started here one. So this is the idea of the Interactivity Router. We have here page A. We have page B. And we have page C. And they are almost the same. But there are some regions that I want to update. So here something like this, something like this. and something like this. So we have 3 pages, and the usual thing we would do. Is there any repo with okay, so Mager is asking if there is any repo with examples of the Interactivity API, because he wants to see examples and ideas of blocks. Okay, yes, there are. And let's start from the documentation, which is the best place to start. If you go to developer.wordpress.org, you can find here different handbooks. There is one about the block editor, and here in the block editor, there's the documentation about the Interactivity API. So here in the Interactivity API section, I'm going to share a link in the chat. At the end, you can see here docs and examples. And here you have some examples, some really good examples. For example, there's a showcase discussions, which is really interesting because people have been publishing here the different applications of the Interactivity API. So these are, here you can find a lot of ideas. And another good resource is the block development examples, which is this compilation of examples using the APIs provided by WordPress for block development. I'm the main maintainer of this repo, so I created this little app. I'm going to also share this in the chat. And the cool thing is that you can very quickly find the examples you want by selecting the right tags. For example, there is a tag for the Interactivity API, and here you have a few examples. And the good thing about this app is that this page can be shared. So yeah, there are some examples here, and for each example, you have a live demo and you have the zip, so you can download directly. Each example is a plugin, so you can just throw this folder into the plugins folder of your WordPress installation, and you can just try the behavior. For example, this one, Interactivity API quiz block, you can see here the code, and you can see here the live demo of that plugin. For example, this is an implementation of a quiz. Singer of Led Zeppelin was Robert Plant. Yes, I'm a Led Zeppelin fan, so Revolver was one of the Beatles. Yes. As you can see, only when I'm controlling this on the client, only when I have answered all the questions, I can check my answers. So, okay. I know the answers because I wrote the questions. But now we can check the answers, okay? And we can reset, and then we can say single student was whatever, yes, and whatever. And we have only one correct. And we can reset. So yeah, this is an implementation. And here in the code, you can see how there are two blocks actually, one for each question and another one controlling the other blocks. And here in the Vue.js, we can see how we have different stores and different actions. And for the other one, we have okay, this is the main one, and this is each question. And for each question, we also have its own set of actions, its own set of state properties, and so on. So yeah, we can play and we can connect the different blocks. One interesting thing is that with project store FA, with project store FA. One interesting thing is that these two blocks, they share a specific namespace. So when I define two different blocks that share a namespace, I can share information. So I can do things in one block and I can make the other block to react to that change. So that's really cool. I think the most complex thing, okay, so Maggie is asking, I think the most complex things right now is to understand when to use the state, when to use the context. But he's getting the thing. Yeah. Yeah, there are also in the documentation some guides. And for example, here is a really good article about each concept. That I think, yeah, it provides some guidance in that sense. The way I see it right now is that the local context or the local context makes sense when the information is only relevant to a specific portion of the DOM. And that can be very small. It can be a div, it can be a UL. It's a way to isolate one portion of code only to affect a specific portion of the DOM. The global state makes sense when the information, the state variables, all that information that I want to store and manage and modify, I want it to affect different portions of the DOM inside a bigger, inside the block, inside the HTML that is managed by the block. In that case, I think the global state is interesting. It's true that we could also use like a context on the top level, but in that case, you can decide. The interesting thing about the global state is that you can share the information of the global state with other blocks. And that's where things get interesting. If you define local context, I don't think, let me check that. I don't think you can access from the outside to that information, but with the global state, you can access that information from other blocks. And there's this demo, Movies Deb, that showcase what I'm saying here. For example, here's a block and here's another block. They both share a namespace. But so this allows me to implement this type of effects. When I click here, this block reacts to the state variable that is in the namespace that is shared by both blocks. So maybe the data has been defined here, but as this block is also defined as part of the same namespace, they can share information and they can share actions and they can share callbacks and they can share everything. So yeah, this is an example, and as you can see, it works all the time with all the blocks. This is a really good example of that. Okay, where was I? I think I have deviated a lot. Yeah, examples. There's also an example for Interactivity Router, which is this one. I don't think it's the best example in the world. I have a better one now, but yeah, it's an example of an implementation. The idea here is that I have 4 posts created and I can navigate through the content of each post without doing a full reload of the page. For example, when I click next, this part doesn't change and I get the new content, and you can see here the specific attributes of the new block that is being loaded and the URL that is being loaded here. So yeah, this is an example of using the interactivity router. I have a better example now. Let me just show you that very quickly. I'm still working on it. But if I go here to quiz, okay. The idea, I think this is a better use case of using the interactivity router. Right now I have 5 posts. I have quiz and I have question 1, question 2, question 3, question 4. They are all built over a block. So the information here is inside a block. And also this block has an interactive block. So I can go here and this is a block that uses the interactivity API. Well, the idea is that I can go to a page. Maybe this could make sense not as a post, but as a page. And then each question is a custom post type and they all share the same template. Something like that, I think is the best use case for this. So you can have even just a landing page. I may do that. You can have just a landing page without any other type of navigation and you just enter directly into this quiz. And right now I'm randomly selecting questions. And when I start, each question has a time remaining and I cannot navigate anymore to this question. And I have 10 seconds. Right now, I don't have a way to provide an answer. I just want to test the interactivity router and the navigation. But yeah, this is working fine. And we can see here, if we go reset quiz. Well, I can share the repository where I have this, which is in by the way, if you are interested in following what I'm doing lately, I have implemented this thing in my GitHub profile, which actually I have like different GitHub profiles because my GitHub username is actually Juanma Guitar, but I have different organizations to organize the different areas I've been working during my career. So when I started focusing more on WordPress, I created this Juanma-JolVP organization, and here's where I do most of my work. Okay, so in this organization, I have a landing page that shares the activity I have had lately. For example, I automatically share here the latest posts that I publish. I have here my feature projects, which are like the most interesting projects that I have, and you can see the activity I do on them. But also I share here the repositories that I have created lately. So here you can see the repository with the project I'm showing you. I'm going to share this in the chat as well. And also some repositories that I start, and also some gists that I have. For example, this is a gist that I use a lot. This is a very quick way to detect, to check if the custom blocks that I have defined are properly registered. If I go to the block editor, I need to be in the block editor, which means I need to have access to the .vp global window. I can just launch this, and this tells me the custom blocks that so it goes through the list of all registered blocks and excludes from that array of objects, it excludes the core blocks. So it just returns the custom blocks. So this is a pretty useful snippet that I use from time to time. Well, so yeah, I was sharing this because I wanted to share this repository with this example, but also if you want to check some other things I've been working on lately, you can directly go to github.com/Juanma-JolVP. Perfect. Let's continue. With this demo. If I go to Reset Quiz, we can see here in the console, in the elements, so this is when we navigate through different pages. I have here defined a Interactivity Router region quiz. So this is the portion that is going to be updated whenever I navigate. As you can see, if I go to question 1, you can see how things here have been highlighted, which means that only this portion of the DOM has been processed and updated. So this is the interesting thing. The whole page hasn't changed, and the only portion of HTML that has been updated in the browser is this new elements. So there's a div happening, and the new parts inside this section are the ones that are updated. Okay, Okay, let me close conversations because I'm just jumping from one thing to another. But that's fine. This is just sharing the stuff out loud. Okay, I have shared the samples. I have shared this. I have shared this, and we were checking the documentation about the global state, local context, and derived state. And I was here. When we navigate through pages, we usually do that by clicking links, and that provokes a full page reload. But the Interactivity API Router, if we go to the documentation, which is this one, the Interactivity API Router provides two methods, two actions. One of the actions is navigate. And the navigate method, what it does is it fetches the page HTML and updates any interactive regions whose contents have changed in the new page. So if I navigate using normal navigation, the whole content is updated. But if I use navigate, from the Interactivity Router, Interactivity Router, then what happens is the following. I fetch the HTML of the new page. What I can do this, okay, I'm going to do this. This full, okay. Then one. Nice. Okay. So I have this. Going to group. I'm going to create like different steps. We fetch the HTML of the new page, then we get the region. How is this called? This. We get extract the router region, and update in the DOM only the new parts in the in the router region. This is the part of the Interactivity API that leverages Preact. So I'm going to say here Preact. Preact is like a React. So this is more or less what a React application is doing. And every time I go to a new page using Navigate, this is what's going on. So there's no a full page reload, only the HTML is fetched via a fetch in the background, and only not all the HTML is updated in the browser, only specific portions. How do we define those portions? By using the data WP router region. So if we go to the application, let me see if I can show you. Yeah, this is the code. This is the code. This is the code that I have, and the demo is here. Okay, this is the and here what I have is a block using Interactivity API. To define a block with the Interactivity API, we need to mark the block as supports interactivity true. This is one of the requirements, supports interactivity true. Then we need to create another thing is in the block.json, we need to define a view script module. This will make that in the build process, the bundle will be prepared to be loaded as a module in the client, in the browser. Which means that if I go here, for example, the Vue.js imports the WordPress interactivity package. If I don't use the experimental modules flag, what happens in the build process when I do WP scripts build is that this library gets bundled with the final JavaScript, which means that the JavaScript is going to be bigger. When we use the experimental modules, what we do is we serve this JavaScript as a JavaScript module in the browser. The browsers can manage directly modules. So in the bundle, this library is not going to be bundled in the final JavaScript, so the Vue.js is going to be lighter. So it's going to have less size. We can see here the Vue.js, it basically only contains our code. Yeah, it doesn't contain anything else. And we can see here that we have an import that is going to be managed directly by the browser. So when we serve JavaScript modules and the blocks provides different ways to do that very easily. So what do we need to do to serve a Vue.js in a block as a module? The only thing we need to do is to define this Vue.js as a Vue script module, and when we do the build, we just add the flag experimental modules. When we do that, any import that we use in the Vue.js is going to be imported directly in the browser. So let's check that. If we go to the demo, when I load, let's see, network. Let's go to quiz. Okay, we can see how the Interactivity API engine is loaded independently. It's loaded before because there is a preload of the code. If we go to sources, no, if we go to elements, we can see here that the Interactivity API. Preload. Yeah, we can see here how there's a module preload, which means that is loaded independently, but it's loaded just when the page starts loading. And then WordPress at some point it does the enqueue script. So that's where the let me see. This is the one of the block library. I guess maybe it's the navigation. Then we have the interactivity router. Okay. Quiz. Why can't it say remote address? I'm going to remote address. What else? TypeScript. Yeah, this is the one of our plugin and the interactivity API. So I have those packages loaded, and then also the navigation. Navigation, it loads also like its own module. So here's the Vue.js of our plugin, and one of the cool things of JS modules is that I can load. So in this case, let me see if we can have here a diagram. So we have the interactivity API JS module. Which is basically the interactivity API engine, the JavaScript that contains all the logic behind the interactivity API. This is a module. This is preloaded when the page starts being loaded in the browser. The page starts being loaded in the browser. Okay. This is one module. Then we have the Vue.js. The Vue.js file of our block, of our custom block. This Vue.js has import this import blah blah blah. It has this import blah blah blah. So whenever this happens, it automatically imports the JS module because it's already in the browser. It has been loaded. It has been preloaded. But then at some point, the code, it does this, which is really cool, because when we trigger the navigation, and what's happening here in the code is that at some point in the on click, we do navigate. So this is the navigation managed by the Interactivity API router. This is when we are enabling this type of navigation. So what's happening is when we do on-click here, we are dynamically loading the package that contains the logic of the Interactivity Router, which is also super performant. And we have this. We have this. And this, it going to provoke the loading of another package. But only when there's a click in that element. So as you can see, all the APIs and all the workflows that are encouraged by the Interactivity API and working in the background are very performant. They are thought with performance in mind, like making the requests and the process of HTML in the most effective way. Okay, nice. So when I do click, and in our example, we were doing that here, when I click on any of these elements, and I can see this in the code here, I have a random selection of URLs that I am adding to the state. I'm doing that here, random question slugs, and using these directives, I'm creating a loop, and for each value, I'm creating a link. The text is managed by a state variable. This is actually a derived state because item slug, if I go here, item slug, as you can see, this is derived state, which means that I am getting the context, and for each item in the context, I'm doing something to generate the final text. Okay. But the interesting thing is this actions navigate, because every time I click on these links, I'm not going to do a full page reload. I'm going to do a client-side navigation, because actions navigate here is this. So what I'm doing here is I'm accessing the DOM element that triggered this method. I'm preventing the default, so the default event in the browser doesn't get triggered. If I don't do this, I will get a full page reload. So I need to do this to stop any behavior in the browser, because it's like saying, hey, don't do anything else. I'm going to take control of things from now on. So what I'm doing is I dynamically import the interactivity router, and then I navigate using the actions navigate from the interactivity router. This is something that is documented here. If we go to the documentation, we can see how the package interactivity API exposes two methods, the navigate method and the prefetch method. And the navigate method, what it does is this. It fetches the HTML of the new page, it extracts the specific router region, and it updates the portion of the DOM that has been updated. Nice. What else we can show from this demo? Okay, another interesting idea behind this is the concept of a state in the client and a state in the server. Because with the interactivity API, we can define a state in the client. For example, here, I have these props that are defined in the state. We have a namespace, which is Interactivity Router Region Quiz. And under this namespace, I can define state variables, I can define actions, callbacks. And here I'm defining these props. Visited question slacks, current timer page. This is something that I'm defining in the client. But when the page is loaded, I'm also passing some initial values from the server. And what's happening here is that for every page I'm going to put this. This is the client. This is the client. And this is the server. And let me choose this. This is the server. It's going to be blue. This is going to be green. Okay. So for the same namespace, let's call it a namespace A. For the same namespace, I have state. Okay, let me adjust this a little bit. I'm going to put this here. Okay, so this is a state for namespace. No, I'm going to do the opposite. This is going to be the namespace, and the state is this. So we have defined a state in the server, and in the client. So when the page is loaded, I have some initial values coming from the server, which is what I define with the WP interactivity state. This allows me to define some initial values from the server. And then when the JavaScript is loaded, I can also define some values in the client, like for example this. What's happening here is that there is a merge happening. There is a merge happening. And what I got here is whatever came from the server plus whatever was defined in the client. I'm going to express this a bit better. I'm going to express this a bit better. Put this like this and this. Yeah, I think this is better. Something like this is better. A bit more clear. So we have some initial state in the server, then we have some initial state in the client, and we merge both, and in the client I finally have the two the merge of the two states. But what happens when we do this navigation? I can have something similar. So I can have here some namespace. That is the result of this. If the result of, okay, let Let me put this here, and I'm going to put this here. So we have in page A a state in the client that is the result of the initial state defined in the server with this function plus the initial state defined in the client here. Okay. Mm-hmm. So what happens when we navigate to a new page that has a new state? That has a new state. Because now we have two different states, and we don't want to automatically merge this, because maybe we want to use the values we are managing through the whole navigation. For example, in the quiz, I may want to, I don't know, keep track of the different responses of the yes or no's, or I don't know. For example, in this example, the initial page, you can see how the first time the page is loaded, the state server and the state in the client is the same. Well, in other words, the properties and the values that we have in the server match the ones we have in the client, because there is a merge of the properties that we have defined for the server, which represents this, with the properties we have defined in the client, which represents this. And in the code, this is the properties that we have defined in the client, and this is. But what happens if I navigate to a new page? I have the global state in the client, but I do something like this. For specific pages, I want to add some information. Maybe I want to add some new fields, or maybe I want to initialize some data for specific URLs. So in that situation, I have a new state in the server defined for that page, and then I have still some value in the client. What's happening in this case, this is explained in the documentation somewhere. If we go to API reference, I think it's okay, I think it's better explained here. Let me have a look at again here, store client methods. I think maybe it's in the interactivity router. Interactivity router, if we go to the package, to the interactivity router package, no, this is not explained. This is something that needs to be added to the documentation. So what's happening right now is that there is soft merge happening right now. There is a soft merge happening right now. Which means that new properties will be added directly to the global state in the client, but new values for existing properties will not be merged. So we will have, for the same properties, we will have one value in the server and another value in the client. So how do we access the values coming from the state? So that's why we have these methods available, which are get server context, get server state. In this case, it would be get server state. Get server state. Get server state. Through get server state, I can access this. And I can decide what to do with these values. So get server state retrieves the server state in an interactive region. This function serves the same purpose as get server context. We have a similar function for the context, but it returns the state. The object return is read-only and includes the state defined in PHP with WP interactivity state, which is this case. We have a default state defined in the server, but for a specific URLs, I have some modified values. For example, extra data is different from the server for each URL, but then I have new fields happening here. So when using actions navigate, the object returned by getServerState is updated to reflect the changes in its properties, without affecting the state returned by store. And we can subscribe to those changes to update the state if needed. So if we start the navigation here, the first time we can see how the state that comes from the server is completely merged with the properties that and the values we have defined for the state in the client. So we can make a difference between the state server and the state, but at the end, we can directly work with this. But then we go to question 1, and we can see, for example, how the extra data property, it has a different value than the one stored in the client state, in the client global state. So here's where this function comes handy, this one, getServerState. Because with getServerState, we can access the new values and decide what to do with them. Maybe I want to update this property with the new value, or maybe I don't, but I can decide to do that manually. In the case of the new fields, they are automatically added to the state because they are not affecting anything. So this is how it works. This. Okay, I'm going to put this here. Okay, nice. So let's work a little bit on this project. Let's go through the logic. For example, one thing that I want to solve, maybe I want to create a template. Let me see if I'm able to create a template, custom template. So if we go to the editor and we go to templates, right now we are using the single post. So what I want to do is to okay, maybe I'm not still in WordPress 6.9. Yes, I'm in WordPress 6.9. Okay, so I thought there was a way to duplicate templates. Edit. Single posts. Can't I create? Okay, let me see. If I go to the post, to the quiz post, the template is single posts. Create new template, custom quiz template. Okay. Group content. Okay, I'm going to try just this to see what happens. This is the custom quiz template. And I want to create a page that I'm going to call quiz contest. And this page, I wanted to use the custom quiz template. Okay. And if I go to the page, I have nothing because I need to edit the page, and I'm going to edit the page with the content of the quiz. So I'm going to copy this and I'm going to go to the page, quiz contest. And I'm going to put this here. So whenever I go to the page, I have this. So no WordPress, no header, no footer. The thing is that if I go here, let's see what happens. I think it's not going to work well, but okay, it worked well. Nice. And then I can have this here. And if I go to quiz context, maybe I can just in the dashboard, in the settings, general, how do I define in the site editor that I want this page as a front page? It should be somewhere here. Customize. Home page settings, static page, quiz context. Publish. Nice. So whenever I go here, I'm going to log out. Whenever I go to the home page, I have this application. I can go to question 2. I can go to question 3. And I can reset the quiz. Nice. I like that it feels like a page done with any other framework. Okay, one thing that I want to do is that when the time gets to 0, okay, time's up, that's fine. But I want to exclude the first page for that, because by default, this is 0, I think, and I want to solve that. I haven't found a way. This should be simple, but I haven't found a way so far to do that. This is the portion of HTML that is displaying that text, which is dynamically created with a derived state called timer text. And timer text should return empty string whenever the timer is less than 0. And that's why by default the time limit. So a time limit is defined, I haven't explained this. The time limit, I'm going to close this, and this. I'm going to go to WordPress Studio, which is here, and I'm going to get the password of the admin. So I can log here, it's admin. And what I wanted to show is, that for each post and for each question, I'm using the same block, and the blocks, each block has an attribute. You can see this in the code here. There's an attribute defined called time limit, and the edit function is providing an inspector control area to allow the user to edit that value. So whenever I edit this value and I save, for example, this value for question 4, when I save, it starts in 10. This value is stored as an attribute for the block. And I can set quiz. And if I go to question 4, the timer starts in 10 because in the render PHP, we are getting this value from the attributes of the block. We are setting the time limit. The time limit variable is used to define the context for each block. Why the context? Because This is a value that makes sense only for each block. I don't really want to share that globally. So I think it makes sense to be part of the context. And that's why I'm defining this here by using the WP interactivity data WP context. So this time limit, every time I load a page, I can see how it's part of the data WP context of each block. Nice. And if I go to question 3, we can see how this changes, and we can get this value. So the state in the client is merged with the state that is provided by the server. There is a merge, and there's a soft merge in the case of navigation, but because this property time limit, let me see. We go to the console, reset quiz. It's in the context. It's in the context. And if I go to question 1, time limit 22 and time limit 22. Okay, this is interesting because the time limit that was in the context default field. Okay, let me do one test. I want to do one test. So these properties, instead of defining them as part of the state, I want to define them as part of the context. Extra data. And now in the client, well, let's see what happens with this. Let's see what happens with this. If I go to here, set quiz, or just the homepage. Okay, I need to, no, I'm doing this already. So in the building the quiz, I should have this as part of the context. Nice. And so current Slack context extra data. Okay. No, I need to do this here. I create the array and then I add the extra properties. Let's see what happens here. Okay, what I want to check is that now why is this provide, maybe it's cached something. If I do a full reload, okay, what's new? The problem that I'm having is that I am defining this extra data. Okay. Okay. Because this extra data and default fields were defined for the state. Okay. Yeah, it works as expected. Okay, now is the context in the server, default field, default value, default data, and default value, default data, time limit, and so on. If I go to question 1, the context server provides this new value. That is updated, but the question 1 data is not merged. This is something that I need to clarify. Yeah. Why are some values being merged? So time limit. Because on every new navigation, okay, yeah, I know why. Because I'm in the Vue.js, I'm specifically updating the context. Yeah, that's why. Because if I don't do this, I guess I would get the previous value. I don't know. Let me see. CTX is not defined because somewhere here. Okay, let me comment this. Let me comment this. Okay, question 1, 21, 20. No, what I can do here is console text and context instead of updating. Let's analyze this. Okay, first load of the page. What we have here is context from the server. What I'm getting from the server, because this is the first load, all of this is automatically merged in the client. And because in the client I don't have any specific context, define, well, okay, here it makes no sense. Okay, it makes no sense because I have one context in the client for the first time. But then every time I rewrite, let me see if I go to question 1. So now I have the context from the server that contains the new time limit, the new field, and extra data. But in the client, yeah. So the previous context remains, as you can see. The previous context remains here. So we have the default field, the default value, the default data, the time limit remains. So if I start this in question 1, no, there is no timer happening. Okay, let's see what happens if I start the time limit instead of -1 to, I don't know, maybe 20. Let's analyze this. If I define the default, my expectation is that the timer continues with the same value even if I navigate to a new page. This is my expectation here. So let's see if that's true. I'm going to reset quiz. Time limit -1. This is not correct. Okay, because I have changed the build. I need to change this one. Okay. If I reset, let me, yeah, you can see 20, 19, 17. Okay, so this has been $11. Okay, let's analyze this. The first time we had 20 and 20, but the second time, we start from 20 all the time. We start from 20 all the time. We start from 20 all the time. Because I'm not updating this, right? Okay, this is a timer that is in the state, right? It says a timer that is in the state. So this is not really affecting this. And every time I start, every time I start the page, I initialize that value with. Okay, what happens if I define this as part of the context? Well, let me see. State timer. Okay, I have the context here, so I should be able to, instead of setting a state timer, I should be able to do context timer, context timer, context timer, context timer, context timer. Okay, let's change all the instances of state timer with CTX timer, which I have here. And then in the timer text. I need to do this. I need to do this. Yeah, because I have changed this automatically. Okay. Let's see what happens here. This is exploration time. 20, 19, 18, 17. No. It gets okay, it gets because I'm doing time limit, because I'm doing this. If I don't do this, okay, if I don't do this, time's up, because yeah, I need this. Okay, context server time limit. Change this to CTX time limit, because I have in the context, I have a time limit. So I was initializing every time to the context in the server, and now I'm initializing to the context in the client, which makes sense. So, okay, now it should work. 18, 17, 16. No, this is not working. This is not working, but it's a good way to explore this and to learn more a bit about this. So let's check what we have. We have local context, which is the same than the one we get from here. Seconds, 20 seconds. If I go to question 1, it starts in 20 seconds. Why? Because every time I navigate, this is reset to this value. But I thought, because it's a timer and now we have time limit. Okay, so let's continue with our exploration. What I'm going to do is, instead of, so timer, what is timer? Define, is in the server timer? Timer? Timer's -1, okay. So what I'm going to say is, if CTX timer is different than -1, then get whatever you have in CTX timer. If not, then get reset to the original value. So here, okay, reset quiz. Right now, in the context, because it's not CTX timer, is state timer. So if state timer, or maybe what I can do is find this also in the context. Hmm? 20 seconds. If I go to question 1, 17. Yay! And if I go to question 3, 9 seconds. Yay! We got it. Okay. So so yeah, we have this context server, which is the value of the attribute that it changes on different pages. This is the default value of the attribute. This is the custom one that we have set via the inspector control. And this is the custom value. Then we have the local, the value in the client that it doesn't change unless we update it manually. And then we have the timer. As you can see, we have said something like, okay, if timer is different than -1, set it to the time limit value. And then every time I change the page, I update it to the previous value. So the timer just continues. So I don't really need this because I guess I can just define this as a value that doesn't get properties from the server. So this is just an exploration, but yes, I'm going to -1 is the one that I want. Okay. This is reset to 20 because here I want it to be -1. So now what I want to do is times up. This gets reset to the time limit of this page, of the block on this page. And this has a different value. State timer, state timer. I think I need to reset the quiz. Time's up. Question 1 has 22. I think the values are too similar, so let me edit post question 3. Yeah, because I was really in the quiz, so I want to go to question 3. Exit code editor. And here I want to maybe question 3. Okay, saving, and if we go to the home page, if we go to the home page, we can, and we have here the inspector. Question 1, 22. We can see that from the server, we are getting for Slack question 1, we are getting time limit 22. That is set to time limit. And if we go to question 2, we can see the time limit, and this timer has been set, and the state here, the local state, is the one. Okay, let me see if we can. If we go to question 1, the state here, target, the timer. Okay, this is the value that is being updated. So now what I want to do is to remove this text whenever we are in the home page. This is not working. I don't know why, because state timer is less than 0. So let's do some debug. If I go to sources, we go to view, and we go to here, state timer. When I reload the page, state timer is -1, so this returns empty. Now start timer is 0. Why is 0? Why is this 0? Timer -1. When this is set to 0, is there any 0 here? Ah, state timer 0. So that's why. Okay, let me see. Don't need to do. So starts new timer. If time limit. I just can remove this. yeah, it's triggering this every time I go through this variable, because it gets updated every time the state timer is updated as well. So I'm just going to reset quiz. I don't get that value because state quiz is -1, but then on every question I can show the remaining time. And what I want to display is that the time is up. Yeah. But in the reset quiz, this shouldn't be displayed. Nice, nice, nice. Let's do some more fine tuning. We go to posts, question 1. Okay, so right now the content that I'm getting is directly, what I want to do is, well, let's do one test. I can see how whatever I put here is not retrieved by the router region, because the router region is this area here. This is nice actually, because with block bindings, what I could do is to create here a section to edit any internal information via metadata for this post, and that information is not going to be displayed by the quiz. Let's check this. Where do I have this? I'm going to visit site. Okay. Reset quiz. Reset quiz. Okay, I want question 1. What happens? Okay, question 1. Yeah, we can see how all the information that was outside of the region is not displayed here. So I can actually do that. And here I have interactive logs. So here I can do some interactive magic. For example, this is an image that uses the Interactivity API for this lightbox effect. Nice. So what I want to display now is, I will just to display the number of the question. The number of the question. No, the number or the name of the question. I can do that here in the render. Maybe I can. One thing that I would like to do is to separate this, maybe a different file, and then include it. Okay, that's something to explore. For now, what I want to do is this is the content, and maybe we can do here an H2. and h2 with data WP text current slack. I'm going to create a derived state called title question. And in Vue.js, I'm going to say don't I have the question text? For example, here. I'm just doing item slack. Okay, let's create title question or question text. No, title question is a good one. So in the context, let's see what information do I have in the context. If I go to question 2, yeah, because, okay, let's, for now, title question is going to be just this, and I'm going to comment this for now. Title question is going to be just an empty string. If I go to question 2, let's see the information that I have. In the context, what I have is the current slack. And in the state, I have the slacks here. So with current slack, well, ideally, this is something that it would be great to implement, to add some metadata for the post and including some information like the title and I don't know, something else, maybe some documentation to know more about that. But yeah, I think that the project, I'm going to remove, well, what I can do is to get the slack from the current slack from the context. So what I can do is to const ctx const current slack, and we can do this, or yeah, let's do this for now. Okay, so this is the current context that gets updated on every new page. me try something. No, this is correct because state title question and title question. I get access to the context, which contains the current Slack, because the current Slack is provided here, and in the view I'm just saying because maybe there's a slash of something, or maybe the directive is not correct. Is data 12-bit text? No, it's correct. H2. Let me see here what's happening. Let me see if I go to the build and to the render. The H2 is there. Let me do else. Okay, so let's debug this a little bit. What's happening here? Okay, I don't care about this, but in question 2 and in question 4, this is not. State timer text. Okay, this is not triggered. Because I need to access not get context, but get server context. And I can directly destructure this. Okay, so I reset. And if I go to question 2, I can see what's happening here. Okay. Current Slack from context server. Okay, aquí is quiz. That's fine. But if I go to question 3, why is quiz? Because get server context. Get server context. Get server context. At this point, it should get server context. At this point, it should provide. Okay, if I watch. Server context. Okay, let's just do this. Okay, I don't understand this. Quiz. Okay, reset quiz. This is quiz. Because server context, current Slack is quiz. If I go to question 1, okay, the console still is not displayed. So at this point, this so in the context server, Slack is question 1, but this is not displayed yet. Title question. Okay. I know what's going on. I need to do current Slack get server context. Okay. And I'm going to return current Slack. Okay, that's fine for now. But in the init question, I get subscribed to the context server. So what I'm going to do is ctx current Slack. No, current Slack. Yes. CTX current Slack. This is done here in start timer. Okay. In that case, I don't need to do this, because whenever the timer starts, well, this is not the best place to do this, but for now, whenever the timer starts, the Oh no, this is an internal for the Slack. So I can do this. I can do this. Contact server, init question. And I'm initializing this here. And okay, and now the yeah, I need to do this. I get subscribed to the local that is going to be question 2. Okay, question 3. Nice. And if I remove this, okay, and okay, perfect. So this is what I wanted to get. And I think, guys, I'm going to stop here. Yeah, I'm very happy with this demo. I may make it bigger with a better design and with more questions and maybe with metadata that I can add to the post, maybe even create a custom post type for the questions. And yeah, this can be like a nice demo of the interactivity router and something that works really well. I think it's pretty fast the way it works. We can also do a preload, prefetch. This is something that I want to investigate. So every time I go to a question, it's already loaded. So this can also be implemented. So yeah, what I'm going to do is to prepare maybe 20 questions, 30 questions with metadata pointing to the specific documentation sites. It will display a selection of 5 with this behavior. Each question will have a specific time to answer the question. It can have images, code blocks, and a lot of things. It will be a yes or no. And what else? And yeah, it will have a prefetch, so the navigation is bigger, and at the end you will get a result. Whenever all the questions, whenever all the questions have been solved, you can get a button here to check results. If I reset quiz, I do start question 1, I have some time, but if I navigate before, I can get the time I have spent on each question, and by the end I can get a result. Okay, yeah, I like it. This is a good use case for this. Okay, guys, hope you have a great weekend and hope this session has been useful. And yeah, see you next week or any other week. Okay, bye, guys.